Well, we told you that the next show would be Friday at 2, but we didn't want to wait. So we figured we'd just take it right now. Welcome into an emergency podcast edition of the PHLY Phillies podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Xfinity. Xfinity, imagine that. And I brought some friends, or a friend with me, because Ethan Hartley's always here. I brought a friend with us today to talk about this. It's our buddy Bill Matz from the PHLY Flyer Show, and of course from Philadelphia. The news is, of course, Ranger Suarez has signed a 5-year, $130 million deal with the Boston Red Sox. And I think this is a scenario, Bill, where two things can be true at once. We expected this to happen, not necessarily with Boston, but we expected Ranger to depart.
I mean, you did call it.
We did talk about Boston a month and a half ago, but I'm not going to gloat right now. We expected Ranger Suarez to depart, and also it doesn't suck any less because Ranger has become a fan favorite of this city over the last 5 or 6 years as his time as a member of the Phillies.
Yeah, you can only have so many 30-plus-year-old pitchers on 5-plus-year deals making 20-some million. Like, I understand that. You can't keep anybody. He wants his pay. You can't keep everybody. He wants his payday. He's earned it. But, man, it does suck. Like, you just really, really like the guy. He's missed some time the last few years. Maybe it's not the smartest investment, but a dude who's nails in the postseason and just like has that mentality you wish other guys would have. It's a bummer to lose him, even though you knew it was coming. It was a foregone conclusion. But it doesn't suck any less because he was one of everyone's favorite players on the team, I think.
No doubt. A guy who would be willing to take the ball in any situation. You saw him act as kind of a pseudo closer at times in postseason runs. Was the opener for or was the bulk guy after Aaron Nola was the opener in Game 3 of the playoffs. A guy who, as you said, had some postseason nails to him. And Ethan, if we could take a look at the postseason numbers that Ranger Suarez has produced in his time as a member of the Phillies, that's probably the undeniable. Whether you want to talk about the fact that he has only made 27 starts in his career at the most of a season, the fact that 157 in the third innings is the most that he's thrown over his career. But you see it right there. I mean, none of these seasons over a 2 ERA, a 1.23, a 1.93, only 4 innings in that game against the Mets. But for a guy who I expected nothing from, if you remember that Game 4, he had been injured for a majority of the season. It was kind of like, or majority of the back half of the season, it was kind of like, is he going to give you anything? He really kind of grinded out a 4 1/3 innings appearance and kept them in the ball game. And then last year, the one start or the one bulk innings, 5 innings, just the 1 earned run. Ranger Suarez has been unbelievably consistent in the postseason. And other than knowing you get a guy who knows how to pitch, he throws strikes, he changes speeds, he works backwards. We'll talk all about that in just a little bit. If you're the Boston Red Sox, you're looking at this. Not only are you getting a middle of the rotation guy, probably a legitimate 2 to a high end 3, especially with the pitching staff that they're constructing with Crochet at the top. You're getting a guy who comes postseason time is going to be a legitimate competitor.
And for this franchise here in Philly that the last 3 years have been defined by, you kind of came up small in the postseason, huh? He doesn't fit into that category. Now you see like the limited sample size simply because everyone around him kind of came up small. But when he's been called on, he's been great. And you think of this era of Phillies baseball, Bedlam at the bank is the high point. Sure, it's Bryce.
For sure.
But if he doesn't come in after the 2 David Robertson walks and get those 2 outs, who knows? We're just thinking blow this thing up years ago.
When you talk about Ranger, you talk about, I've used this phrase so many times on this show. He's a pitcher's pitcher. He doesn't throw particularly hard, 90, 91, 92. He doesn't have elite level breaking ball stuff. We talk about that wipeout sweeper or a devastating changeup, like the guys that you can think of that have that pitch. Christopher Sanchez's changeup, the go-to pitch when it matters the most. That doesn't matter for Ranger Suarez because with Ranger, you just have a guy who mixes speeds well. He changes eye levels. I always joke about the fact that Ranger so many times gets a guy to stand there and look stupid at fastball at the letters 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's a pitch that should be hammered over the wall, but because he's mixing changeup and sinker and curveball and slider so effectively,
good luck guessing.
You have no idea what it's going to be. We've talked so many times this past summer about how in his 5 or 6 pitch arsenal, there would be 1 or 2 pitches that were the bulk of the pitches that he used in a game, but it was never the same pitch over a start. It'd be 28 changeups here and then 18 sinkers there and 25 curveballs the next night. Based on matchups, you never knew what you were going to get. This is a pitcher's pitcher, And for a guy that's going to step into the number 2 hitter-friendly ballpark in baseball in Fenway Park, according to Park Factor over the last 3 years, only Coors Field is a better hitter-friendly ballpark. Fenway Park is a tough place to pitch.
Yeah.
But when you do what Ranger does well and you pair it with the fact that he keeps the ball on the ground at a ridiculous clip, I think he can have success even pitching at Fenway Park.
No, I fully agree. And, you talked a few months ago about how there aren't that many, like, that bulldog mentality, like, this is my mound. I don't know if he's one of those guys, the manager comes out and he's going to say, get the F back in there. But, like,
right.
He very much is, you said, like, pitcher's pitcher. He's going to mental warfare with the batters.
Sure.
Like, he is very much, he's got that little smirk, and he's going to strike you out, even though he's topping out at 92.
5 pitches last year, at least 15% of the time used. Sinker, changeup, cutter, curveball, 4-seam. On top of that, doesn't walk hitters, very rarely has command issues, keeps the ball off the barrel of the bat, doesn't get hit hard. When you're going to go pitch at Fenway, short porch in right field. Obviously, the wall is there, but short porch in left field nonetheless. Doubles are a very real thing. Doubles turned into triples because of caroms and things like that are very real things. This is the type of guy who, as you said, not really going to probably break glass with his velocity, but just kind of keeps you off balance, keeps you guessing. His metrics are as good as his actual numbers. There's not a balance between like, well, he gets kind of lucky and keeps the ball on the ground, or gives up hard contact, but it's hit right at guys. All of the metrics tell you he's as good as his numbers dictate.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about this Phillies staff now, like, this is a hit. I know they've
sure
they kind of got a year ahead of it with Luzardo and everything, but just thinking about what they're going to put out as their 5, it's a little thin. Considering what we've done the last several years with, like, yeah, man, we probably have the best 5 in baseball.
Sure.
Just 1 through 5. Now it's a little thinner.
Well, you run into the problem of course, you lose I think a top-of-the-line rotation type of guy for most staffs. The luxury of having him as your 3 is a great thing to have for the Phillies, but you run into losing that type of guy to free agency, which, again, we all expected, but nonetheless a blow. Zach Wheeler's timeline is still questionable. They said he was throwing from 75 feet. The next step is 90 feet. Like, I expect him to pitch in 2026.
Certainly.
But I don't expect it to be till probably early summer.
Yeah, I don't think he's making the opening day start.
Right. So now you're down really the 26 or 27 starts that Ranger made last year. Plus, is it 6 starts? Is it 8 starts? Is it 10? I hope it doesn't get to 10, but like it could. You're missing probably 30-ish starts that you're going to you're going to turn over to Taijuan Walker and perhaps Andrew Painter.
Yeah,
and hope that Aaron Nola bounces back.
And there's more pressure now on Painter, more on Nola, just to kind of keep it together and at least be consistent for you. Doubt he's going to have, the 2.39 ERA or whatever from a few years ago, but just give you quality innings, quality starts. There's just more pressure on these guys who have either proven to be inconsistent or we just don't know anything about and how they're going to pitch at the major league level. And then Taijuan Walker, who, we'll see.
So I think Taijuan Walker, Ethan and I talked about this before, and I think, again, the assumption was that Ranger wasn't going to be back, but we talked about Taijuan Walker because somebody asked, they had made a couple of moves. They picked Zach McCambley in the Rule 5. They made a trade. They acquired some guys in the back end of the bullpen. And we were asked, like, does this signal the end of Taijuan Walker? And I was like, no. Taijuan Walker is going to be called upon in 2026. It may be starter. It may be what you saw last year.
Yeah.
Starter, bullpen.
We're paying you. We're using you, guy.
Right. And he's going, like, there's a role for him in this staff, whether you like him or not. I thought he was much better last year than he was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And if you can get 4.2, 4.3 from your 5th starter, we've been kind of spoiled to see a 5th guy give you a 3.4.
That is very much like we have been spoiled, but also this is the strength of the team.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps this frees up some potential money to fix things wrong with the rest of the team, but it is a concern. Like, this is the strength. This was the strength. Even with the inconsistent lineup, even with, all right, we got Duran, but we're not really sure about this bullpen. It's coming around. Maybe there's something there. The staff was the thing that you could count on. That's not the case anymore, at least in my mind.
Jim Salisbury joined us a couple weeks ago and said, depth is necessary. Like, we talked about the Phillies last year. They were incredibly lucky to have started 9 starters last year.
Yeah.
Most teams don't start 9 guys. It's 12, 13, 15, 18. The Mets, I think, started 19 different guys last year. Depth is important. So now you turn your depth over to a guy you're hoping can be as good as we have pontificated, and we'll take the wait and see approach on him. And of course, handing it over to Taijuan Walker. I do still think they sign a vet to a 1-year deal to kind of stabilize the back end of that bullpen a little bit. There's plenty of guys. Chris Bassett's name comes to mind. I talked about Tyler Mahle before he signed in San Francisco. I do still think they're going to sign a vet, but as you pointed out, what for the last 2 or 3 years has been the calling card, of course, losing Ranger, that takes a hit.
This is the reason you've won the division. Now, okay, let's see. Let's see what you're able to put together. Again, more pressure on Nola, more pressure on Walker, more pressure on Painter, and more pressure on the front office to fix this lineup.
So we said this at the top. 2 things can be true at once. We expected it.
Sure.
It also sucks to hear it like in concrete news, because up until this point, it was like, well, it's going to happen, but we've enjoyed the run. Now,
yeah.
But I will say this, the one thing that we can leave this on. There were reports that Ranger Suarez was very heavily tied to the New York Mets. And I will tell you this, Ethan and I talked about how I thought the Mets made more sense for Framber Valdez than they did for Ranger Suarez. But hearing that from several reputable sources gave it some legs, gave it some tangibility. And when they said Ranger could be a member of the Mets, I went, man, that makes so much sense. Their rotation stunk last year, and they were really trying to eat innings any way they could. It wouldn't hurt any less to hear it happen. So at least from a fan perspective, it not being the New York Mets gives you some calm.
Again, a guy who's had a few injuries, 30 years old. I don't know how smart it is to give the long-term deal to, but also if it was with the Mets, that would hurt.
Sure.
Like, I don't want to go up against this guy. I like him a lot. That would just be a real pain in the ass to have to see him all the time. And again, he's nails in the postseason. Don't want to see them have that either.
You and I and your PHLY Flyers co-host Charlie O'Connor were talking about that disdain for that organization from a lot of people. And he was saying that it took him a little bit to warm up to Zach Wheeler. Now, results make that a lot easier but he's like, this guy was a Met type of thing. And I understand there's a lot of fans that feel that way. Like, you don the Mets jersey, you don the Braves jersey. For a lot of people still it's Yankees still have that hold a little bit. But I think for a lot of fans, you got to go, oh, really? The Mets?
Like,
and
if it came down to it, like, you have to outbid the Mets. I'm sorry. I don't care if it's the wrong move. You got to keep him just to keep him away from there. I can't let him go.
And as I tell Kim and our sales staff all the time, first and foremost, this is a business. And if Ranger got a stellar deal from the Mets,
he's got to do what he's got to do.
I can't fault him for taking it. But I do think a lot of Phillies fans around the Delaware Valley will feel a little bit more at ease that he's a member of the Boston Red Sox.
At least it's in the American League.
So really quickly before we wrap this up, the Red Sox now, their starting rotation, Garrett Crochet, Ranger Suarez, Brian Bayo. They signed Sonny Gray earlier in the offseason. They traded for Johan Oviedo. They have a couple of young guys. Kyle Harrison came over in the Rafi Devers deal. They have Cutter Crawford still is in the mix. What was once a low point for the Red Sox, maybe quantity over quality at the bottom portion of it, but it's a lot of young guys still. What was once a low point for the Red Sox, now with Ranger, now with Gray and Crochet headlining, they've got a pretty formidable starting rotation.
And I always appreciate the idea of quantity at the bottom, because that's baseball. Someone might have that year. It might take you 3 or 4 attempts to figure out who, but it's always good to have that depth as well. Like you just said, depth matters. And they seem to have fixed a consistent problem for them.
So we'll see how Ranger Suarez's next 5 years unfold as a member of the Boston Red Sox. I will say this, I enjoyed your time here in Philadelphia enormously, Ranger, and I will wish you well, and I will miss you, and I know many echo that sentiment as well. I understand it's a business, and it will be a treat to get to watch you now from afar, as it has been over the last 5 years, to watch you pitch at Citizens Bank Park. From signing a $25,000 contract out of Venezuela as a 17-year-old to a $130 million deal, Ranger Suarez, listen, I don't think there's any bad blood here in Philadelphia. We salute you, my friend, and I hope you pitch extremely well in Boston, except when you come back to Citizens Bank Park.
What a day for him.
Good for him.
Hell yeah. Good for you, Ranger.
That's going to wrap up our emergency broadcast edition of the PHLY Phillies podcast. Of course, as always, all of our emergency pods are brought to you by our friends over at Xfinity. Xfinity, imagine that. Big thanks to Ethan Hartley for producing another show today. And of course, big thanks to Bill Matz for hanging around and chatting some Phillies baseball. Ranger Suarez, 5-year deal, $130 million with the Boston Red Sox. We'll break it down a little further in detail on Friday's edition of the PHLY Phillies podcast at noon. Until that time, maybe we'll get some Bo Bichette news, but we'll talk to you at noon on Friday here on the PHLY Phillies podcast.
Go get Bo.
We all silly like the mayor.